There is a persistent narrative circulating online that shifting demographics in India will eventually lead to a population imbalance, and that this shift will lead to a second partition. This fear is often rooted in the history of the 1946 elections. At the time, the two-nation theory argued that Indian Hindus and Muslims were entirely separate nations that could no longer coexist under a single government. The data from those elections showed a clear trend. The Muslim League campaigned on the demand for an independent Pakistan and won 87% of the seats reserved for Muslim voters across the provinces. But a year later, when the borders were actually drawn, a historical paradox emerged. Millions of the people who had just voted for a separate Muslim homeland chose to remain in India. Understanding why that population stayed requires a look at how the borders were actually constructed, revealing a disconnect between political slogans and geographic reality. One common assumption about 1947 is that the borders were drawn to follow the exact boundaries of where religious groups lived. The man responsible for the line was Sir Cyril Radcliffe, a British lawyer with no prior experience in India. He was chosen for his neutrality, but that neutrality came with a lack of familiarity with the land and its people. Radcliffe's maps shows that he largely ignored natural landmarks like the Ravi and Ouse rivers. Instead, he relied on existing British administrative boundaries, known as tehsils, to define the new international border. These lines were drawn to prioritize economic stability. Radcliffe focused on tax collection districts and keeping regional infrastructure, like canal headworks and railways, intact for the new states. The resulting border was a bureaucratic decision made under a tight deadline. Because it prioritized the flow of water and trade over the location of every household, millions of people suddenly found themselves on the wrong side of the line. Those arbitrary lines triggered a refugee crisis, displacing 15 million people as populations scrambled to cross the new borders. This leads to another assumption, that the vote for Pakistan in 1946 was a literal commitment by every voter to move there. In 1946, voting for the Muslim League was framed as a unifying Islamic act. It was a political strategy meant to provide the League with negotiating power against the British and the Congress Party. But when the borders became a reality, millions of those same voters deliberately chose to stay in India. Their choice was driven by practical ties to property, businesses, and family. For many, the prospect of moving to a new state threatened to destroy cross-cultural networks and communal links that had existed for centuries. These millions chose the stability of a secular, democratic polity over the uncertainty of migration, showing that the physical border rarely matched the economic or social realities of the people it divided. If history shows India's population is anchored by choice, what does the future look like? Does modern data support the fear of a demographic takeover? Projections from the Pew Research Center indicate that India is on track to have the world's largest Muslim population by 2050, driven by a younger median age and higher fertility rates. By 2050, the Muslim population in India is projected to reach 311 million. However, India's Hindu population will reach 1.3 billion. This means Hindus would still make up 76.7% of the total population, with the Muslim share at 18.4%. The data indicates demographic stability, not a takeover. History proves that India's Muslims have long been anchored to the nation by choice, and the statistics suggest that India's religious composition will maintain its character for decades to come.